All right, I'm really excited to dive into my informative presentation that I've prepared for today. To start off, I wanted to give a little bit of context to me as the presenter. My name is Jake Anderson. I am currently pursuing a bachelor's in business with an emphasis in data analysis at Utah Valley University. I am born and raised here in Utah. I love it. I have no plans of leaving. And outside of school and work, I really enjoy things like powerlifting. I'll always enjoy a good steak from any restaurant. And in our free time, my wife and I like to travel and find new fun things for us to do. Now, this topic today I'm really excited about because it does have a lot of historical significance, but I also have some really fun childhood memories of reading books and diving into this topic. As you can see here, I will be discussing Alcatraz Island. It's a very commonly known island, but not too many people know much about the history, if anything at all. I want to start off by sharing a quick story. When I was about 10 years old, out of anywhere in the world, my parents decided to take my siblings and I on an RV trip down the West Coast. So we started up in southern Washington. We worked our way all the way down to the Redwood Forest in Northern California. And the most memorable spot that we stopped at and explored in the whole trip was Alcatraz Island in San Francisco. We hopped on a ferry, we took that boat over to the island, and I remember putting some earphones on and listening to a guided tour as we scurried around the island, looking at all of the cells, the rough conditions, and the interesting stories that you could learn from the plaques on the wall. About an hour into the tour, to my surprise, I came face to face with this gentleman right here that I'm pointing at in that picture. His name is Sam Shockley, and he is my great uncle. At that moment, I knew that this would be a topic I'd love to learn about. So I was very excited to know I was related to a notorious criminal. I thought that was really cool as a young boy. And ever since then, I've really enjoyed diving in, not only learning about the dark history of the prisoners and the rough conditions that they endured while they were there, but also about the cool escape attempts and the political moves that took place on the island to help further rights for many United States citizens. So I'm really excited about this topic because I have a family connection. And I think it's really important to understand that Alcatraz Island is much more than just the prison that we know today, that the movies portray it as. What do I mean by that? What does Alcatraz Island possibly symbolize outside of terrible prisoners, terrible people? I'm here today to say that Alcatraz Island is a symbolization of isolation, of resilience, and of the common pursuit of freedom. Now, in order to understand these things and symbols of Alcatraz, it's very important that we understand where Alcatraz began. Back in 1850, Alcatraz was built by the U.S. military to be a military fort. You might recognize that time period in California. It is directly after the 1849 gold rush, where many people from around the country and around the world ran and scrambled to California with hopes of getting rich. As you can imagine, that led to a lot of crime, a lot of crazy things going on that the military really felt they needed to have a presence there. Over time, they noticed that this island in the middle of the bay is a really great place to keep people that they're worried about trying to escape, like war prisoners, people that had committed very terrible acts in the area. And so by 1934, this military fort had officially become a federal penitentiary for the United States. Its goal, their intention for the government, was to house some of the most notorious, dangerous, and unmanageable criminals inside the walls of Alcatraz. As you can see from the map right there, Alcatraz is located in the middle of the bay, the San Francisco Bay, where unlike other beaches, the water is icy almost year-round, especially in the winter. It's shark infested, and although on the map it looks kind of close, a lengthy ferry ride will help you understand it would be very difficult to swim from that little island to any of the surrounding shores. And that made it almost a virtually inescapable penitentiary for all of these notorious criminals. Now that we know where Alcatraz came from, why it was made, it's important for us to dive into what life was like for the inhabitants of the penitentiary. Life inside prison walls at Alcatraz was not great. It was not like our cush lives here in Utah, or for those of you abroad. I'm assuming your life is not as bad as being a prisoner in Alcatraz. But as you can see from the picture of the cell there on the left, only the basic necessities were provided for these criminals. Outside of food, water, shelter, and some very basic medical support, there wasn't a lot of fluff provided for these prisoners. Conditions were difficult. Not only was the water cold, but most of the time the weather was cold, rainy, miserable. The staff and the guards in charge of guarding the prison were not kind. They had no respect for the prisoners. You can imagine that life was pretty tough. On top of that, even if you're a great person having to do time in Alcatraz, most of your cellmates and people on the block would be notorious criminals like this gentleman here, Al Capone, if you're familiar. Some other notable characters that spent time in Alcatraz were George Machine Gun Kelly, the Birdman, and like I mentioned earlier, my great uncle, Sam Shockley. Conditions were tough. Life was not fun. That led to many, many escape attempts. One in particular I want to touch on is from 1946. It was called the Battle of Alcatraz. My great uncle Sam and many other prisoners concocted a plan to overthrow some guards, take control of an armory, and eventually start shooting up the prison with hopes of taking it and being able to escape. After hours of shots ringing out through the cell blocks, the United States Marines eventually landed on the island to regain control, and my great uncle and others who were in charge of planning it, unfortunately or fortunately, however you want to look at it, were sentenced to death, where they no longer were able to carry out their imprisonment or their life here on Earth. These conditions were tough, and so Alcatraz became a very dark symbol for our country's history because of the people and the conditions of the island. Now we understand that there are many great symbols that Alcatraz represents. How could that be possible? Well, by the year 1963, Alcatraz as a penitentiary had been shut down, and by 1969, Native American activists took over the island. They claimed it as Indian land, and it was a symbol of their pursuit and hard-fought battles for freedom. These activists occupied Alcatraz by themselves for 19 whole months. This protest and pursuit of furthering their cause brought a ton of national attention to the island, to the symbol that they were establishing it to be for a struggle for freedom. And this played a key role in the movement for Native American rights during the 1900s. As you can see, it became a front page news headline for many newspapers. Many people were discussing it, talking about it throughout the country, and it played a role not only for Native Americans, but many other Americans who were struggling for their fair share of freedom. Now today, not only was it a sign of freedom, but it's a great place for tourism. Many people from around the world travel to Alcatraz, which is now part of the Golden Gate National Recreation Area. Over 1 million visitors per year hop on a ferry, go out and take tours to learn about both the dark side of Alcatraz and its history and the struggle for freedom that it represents for many of our Native American neighbors, but also other Americans that sought freedom. As we learn about the military fort of Alcatraz, the terrible conditions, the grueling things that both the guards and inmates had to endure during its time as a penitentiary, and the symbol of freedom that it represented through political protests and the Native American activist movement, we learn that even the darkest places in history, like Alcatraz, the federal penitentiary, we can learn and are taught powerful lessons about strength and about freedom.